plug in there. See it?
Oh, that was a nice one. Screen.
Yeah, that's one. Real quick. Share. Like, where's that music coming from? It's from my computer. Screw this.
I know.
That's why it's good.
But, you know, I'm kind of at this point right now.
YouTube.
Good job.
A day job, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm doing COVID class and doing a little job. Not too many hours, but. Oh, wait.
That's in the restroom. It's not in the restroom.
Oh, no, I don't know. I said.
Barbara needs some help. She probably does. I mean, just. I think you can leave it. Yeah. I'm going to say.
Yeah, I usually read, but, myself, so.
Those are no please.
Oh, really?
I'm just curious if they would Germany.
All right, we got that.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. My front porch is there. And I kept trying to take the picture but yeah, I want to send them.
Rucker, R-U-C-K-E.
Oh, okay. Well, that's easy.
Okay. Ready?
All right, Adam, are we live now? Okay. So if I could have your attention
briefly, I apologize for our slight delay. IT issues beyond our control. A couple of announcements as far as the annual meeting, which is scheduled for September the 24th through the 26th. Due to COVID concerns, it's now going to be virtual. So there's not going to be an in-person meeting in Stillwater. However, there is a scheduled field trip that I think it's going to be Saturday morning, but watch your emails from ONPS. The field trip is still scheduled. It'll be outdoors, but the indoor meeting, which will only be the business meeting, will be a virtual meeting. Please pay attention to your emails for that information.
Field trip Saturday.
The field trip is on Saturday, presumably Saturday morning, and that's in Pawnee.
And she asked, please register for both the Zoom meeting and the walk. If you're gonna do it.
For those that are not doing Facebook, are we going to get an email or?
I would think so.
Okay, so there should be an email out, and this is going out to the statewide audience that are zooming in today. Just FYI, keep an eye on your email account, and you should be getting something from ONPS about the annual meeting. So our speaker this evening is Doug Scholing, who is with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He's going to talk a little bit about the program, the Partners for Wildlife, and we greatly appreciate your patience and your perseverance, and thank you so much.
You bet. Hey, thanks for having me. How many people have heard of the Partners for Fish and Wildlife program? 1, 2, 3, 4. Fish and Wildlife Service has had a program. It used to be just Partners for Wildlife, but I guess those fish, they felt like they needed part two. So we threw a Partners for Fish and Wildlife program, but it's been in existence since about '89. Oklahoma was one of the first states. It actually was a trial program. And there was a guy from the Wildlife Department, from the Department of Wildlife, that actually came over and started that program. And there was 6 states in the United States. Oklahoma was one of those first 6 states. So this program has been around since then, and it's been running strong since. I actually came over about 5 years ago. I worked for the state, for the Wildlife Department for 15 and a half years. And I came over and did this for the last 5. So what is the Partners for Fish and Wildlife program? When we go out and meet private landowners, we can only spend our money on private lands. We can't spend it on state land. We can't spend it on federal land. It has to be on private land. We do spend some money on schools. As you'll find out later, we can spend money on some city property, but primarily has to be private lands. And that's kind of a caveat that a lot of people would rather us kind of build on the refuge. The refuge staff wants to get our money back. And we don't have the deep pockets like the USDA. We don't have farm bill money. Ours is appropriated money. And so our budget comes from every year. Every year we have to get our money allocated to us. So who is the Partners program? There's 3 of us in the state. This is kind of how our state is broken out. As you can see, I cover Western Oklahoma. I grew up in Western Oklahoma. I grew up on a farm, and they feel like my best bet is to be in Western Oklahoma, and I can visit with those landowners and do my job. The other guy is Brian Fuller. He is new to the Partners program. He's probably about 1.5 years in, and he is a back guy. And he did all his research and has been working the last 5 years doing nothing but back work. So he's really good in the eastern part of the state and doing bat habitat. And then we got the state coordinator, John Hendricks, and he's the one that tells me that I do everything wrong, but that's not true, not true. So where do we work? We work all over the state. We might work from the Playa Lakes region in the Panhandle to the Lesser Prairie Chicken, to the Cross Timbers, elk. It just kind of depends. The Fish and Wildlife Service has to work on federal trust species. So what are federal trust species? That's pretty much all the migratory species, and then everything that is listed or candidate species or species of concern. So the monarch butterfly is a big one. I do a lot of monarch work, but a lot of my monarch work is either planting grass or cutting cedars. Lesser prairie chicken work, not primarily, it's cutting cedars. I do a lot of cedar cutting, Eastern red cedar. I call them big green machines, and I've spent millions cutting Eastern red cedars. And then out west, we do a lot of wetlands across the state. Kind of depends on the area. We generally do about 80 acres of wetlands every year. It's kind of got a spike in valleys. Last year we did 400 acres of wetlands, and the year before that we just did 40. So you never know kind of how that's going to work. We got to rely heavily on the Natural Resource Conservation Service, the Department of Ag, due to we don't have any engineers on staff. So since 97% of Oklahoma is privately owned, we can definitely work a lot in Oklahoma. And then came along the monarch butterfly, and that just probably made our workload even more. So who do we work with? We work with landowners, the Department of Wildlife. We work with tribes, the Oklahoma Conservation Districts, schools. We can work with about anybody, but we definitely rely heavily on the Natural Resource Conservation Service. Our program, we don't promote it. It's going to be word of mouth. And that's why when I asked if you guys had heard about it, that's why, because we really don't promote our program that much because we don't have as deep of pockets as what we wish we did. So the last 5 years, we've been working on a strategic plan. Since we have limited money, we like to target our money. So where have we been targeting them? Of course, we've been targeting the Lesser Prairie Chicken Range out west, and that's just, we're going to always do that until something different happens with the chicken. The tri-state karst area, that's your bat habitat. That's up in the Ozarks, working with Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas, and that's working with like the gray bat, the Indiana bat, the Ozark big-eared bat. And we've definitely put some projects up there, and that's kind of why the other guy was hired, is to work up in kind of in that area. And then this area down in southeast Oklahoma, that was the Comanche and Little River. It's really hard to get projects in that area, very hard. When you're stationed in Tulsa, it's hard to get a landowner contacts. So we haven't been able to work a whole lot down here. And the guy that worked down here was stationed out of Durant, and we just never could really get a foot in right there. But that's kind of how we do it. We try and target it in certain areas. And then we also have some outdoor classrooms, and then, just for cost. So what are some of the cost share practices that we do? As I said, we do a lot of eastern red cedar removal, and it's high, medium, and low. Native grasses, non-natives, I guess, Bermuda grass, fescue, Old World blue stem. We do a lot of probably Bermuda grass and fescue removal. Old World blue stem, I'd say it can grow on concrete. And with it growing on concrete, it's hard to actually kill it. and get it completely removed. I think you could go out there and round up it and farm it for 10 years and you're gonna get the best stand of old world blue stem you'll ever get. But so Bermuda grass, it takes a little bit, but we can actually probably knock it down to where the native grass can actually compete with it a little bit. Fence removal, that is primarily in lesser prairie chicken range. We don't get to do a whole lot of that anymore. We did early, but we haven't done a whole lot of that in a while. And the fence marking is the same thing out west. Native grasses, shrub plantings, taking everything back to what it was ecologically back in the day. So we use the ecological site index from the Department of Ag. And so if we've got cropland or maybe we're going to have some Bermuda grass field and turn it back to native grasses, we'll always go back to that ecological site index and determine what species we should be putting out there. Prescribed fire. We promote prescribed fire. That's the cheapest way to control a lot of invasive species. A lot of invasive species are not adapted to fire. There's definitely some that are. In fact, some of them benefit from fire. But Fire Boss must be red card certified. That has actually changed with our program in the last probably 4 months. We're actually able to start paying for some prescribed fire. And the Oklahoma Conservation Commission, we actually have about $100,000 to spend on private lands to pay for prescribed fire. And that's the first time that the Partners Program has paid for any prescribed fire ever, because the red card certified requirement. Water development, that's going to be your wetlands. Like I said, we do a bunch of wetlands every year. That's where the program actually started, was doing wetlands. And so we continue to do that. Mechanical, brush removal, timber management, that's going to be opening up the canopies, doing some mid-story management, doing that around bat habitat. We definitely do those around the caves and along areas, at least probably within about 10 miles of any known cave. Vertical structure, people excluding, that's our cave gates. You would think cave gates would be something that would be fairly easy to do, but a lot of landowners don't like to put that restriction, get those cave gates put in. Most of our Ozark big-eared bat caves are actually on the refuge now. It seems like the Ozark Plateau has purchased a lot of those caves to protect them. So cave gates are kind of hard, and that's one of our, in our strategic plan that we're supposed to be doing, is putting in 5 cave gates. And we haven't done one. It's hard. And then outdoor classrooms. Some of our, so the terms of our agreements, we usually give people 2 years to complete the project. That's got a 10-year maintenance agreement. We can cost share up to 75%. The majority of our agreements is about 65%. So the landowner has to have a little bit of bite. And then we can spend up to $20,000 per year per landowner. And that really comes into the chicken range, the lesser prey chicken range, because those landowners have thousands of acres and we'll go out there and cut cedars. It takes several years for us to do that. So this is what our wetland projects look like, a typical one. And backing up areas, kind of flat. You can tell it's pretty flat. And we require them to at least be 3 acres in size. And but we've really done a lot of these. But they got to maintain them for 10 years. And about 10 years, you got to have a pretty decent landowner, because managing wetlands, it's not hard, or it's not easy. That's the hardest thing. I don't even want to own a wetland, and I put a bunch of them in. There's a lot of work involved in a wetland, and that is due to everything comes in there. Every invasive thing comes to that water because it's wet, it's irrigated, and there's just a lot of management to it. And if you don't have a landowner that's willing to just put some time and effort into it, in 10 years, it's generally, the beavers have come in and destroyed it. So wetlands are tough. And this is what our structures look like. If you haven't seen one, this is called a manifold riser. And so slow drawdowns on wetlands is ideal. So you can pull that 4-inch cap off of that nipple and you can drain 6 inches of it at a time. Great idea, but big rains, they fill them up fast. And so when you go and get water coming through 3-4-inch nipples, it's very slow. And if a landowner has anything native growing in there or planted in there, with a big rain, it'll flood it out. So there's other structures. This is the easiest to maintain because beavers can't deal with, all they can do is kind of plug it up and you can unplug it. The big ones now are plastic and they sit in the dam or in the dike. And so you don't have to get wet. You have to get wet to drain these, where this one, you can just sit on the dike and pull boards. A lot easier, but you have to deal with beavers eating plastic. So as you can see, I mean, they built the kind of a walkway to get out there, but that's probably 8 foot. And we like to have our wetlands, 75% needs to be 24 inches or less of water. So here's our cave gates. And this is an old picture. I haven't been to the office in 18 months, so I can't get pictures. So I have to get what's available to me. So timber management, this is actually a project that I did probably 2 years ago. This is what it looked like. And this landowner, he had all his own equipment. And he went in there with the skid steer and ground that all down. And then he's burned it. Of course, you can see a little bit of the brush that's left. And he did, if he couldn't get to it with the skid steer, he did it all with the chainsaw. And he did about 40 acres of it like that. And so he's probably one of our hardest working landowners that I've had, but he did that. And he actually had a cave that they didn't know about, that the bat biologist didn't even know about. And we crawled in it and we had some tricolored bats in it, but we didn't have any Ozark big-eared bats or any endangered bats. But Prairie Restoration. This is primarily what I do. And this is a common site. But as you guys know, that this is a fire and fuel hazard. So up in, around the Vici, all that, those wildfires, those are terrible when they're happening and stuff. But if you go up there and look at it now, those areas, prairie chickens are actually moving back into them. And the reason for it is that it killed all these cedars, and it actually killed a lot of your, it actually killed a lot of the non-native grasses too, because it was so hot. So the native grasses are they're evolved for it. So the eastern edge cedars are bad, and we definitely do a whole lot of work to knock them out. And it looks bad for about a year. It does look rough, and I get that a lot. Just using heavy equipment to take those cedars out, but what it looks like in a year or two after they've done a burn, it's amazing. So this is definitely in Osage County. This is probably on Ted Turner's ranch or Blue Stem Ranch, now owned by Osage Nation, with all the bison in it. But that's what we're geared for. That's what we're trying to get. This was real good Greater Prairie chicken areas. So the Partners Program funded native grass drills, and we put 6 of them out in different conservation districts. This one's actually in Tologa, and it's the DC there, the District Conservationist for the NRCS. And they're good. We do get some native grasses planted, but what are some things that are bad about it is that we don't have a whole lot of control. So do you know how many acres of Bermuda grass have been planted with these? We don't know either. But that's the thing about them is we haven't done these in several years, and that's due to the fact that we don't have as much control on them. So
is there a way for landowners to find out where
So-
those drills are? And
there is, and some of them are still active and some of them aren't, but you would have to contact your local conservation district, and most of them have native grass drills still. There might not be those Great Plains, those $10,000 drills, but they still have your native grass drills. So if you contact me, I can find one that's close. But yeah, there's definitely they're scattered around. Probably there's some in Kingfisher County. I don't know where everybody's from, but there's one in Kingfisher County and one in Lincoln County. So there's some scattered around, one in Logan County, around the Oklahoma City kind of area. This is a native grass planting, and this was actually coming from cropland. And this was actually done, this one's in Kingfisher County, and this is done on my personal place. So this, I wanted it to be less grass, more forbs. I wanted it to be your typical monarch planting. And so as you can see, this is all Maximilian sunflower, and Maximilian sunflower just flourish. And if you see a bunch of Maximilian sunflower out there like that, that means there's no cattle. Cattle aren't in there, and until it gets established. You can see our grasses coming up around it, but that's an ice cream plant for cattle. So they think that's like your ice cream. Then there's this is Illinois bundleflower coming up, but this was done probably not your typical native grass plant. This was planted to wheat and grazed out. We dumped probably, it's 50 acres, and we had 200 head of cattle. We went out there and broadcast it, and it rained, and the cattle trampled it in. And the next, like we did that in March, by April, we had full cover. We had grass covering the whole thing. And so
when you say you broadcast it, was that with the tractor?
we broadcast, yes, with the tractor, and just drove around with your red tub behind the tractor. And that's not your typical way of planting it, because we didn't use a drill. We didn't do everything right. We didn't follow the spec from the Department of Ag, but we had success. And so with our program, I always say I live in a little bit of a gray area. I'm going to make it work for the land. So if the landowner doesn't have access to tractors or doesn't have access to a lot of that equipment, we're going to try and find a way to make it work. I don't follow specs very good. It's a good way to start thinking, but I also want to work with that landowner and make it a success. This is what I want it to look like, and I don't care how you get there, but that's what I want it to look like at the end. So, so I'm more of the one that's gonna kind of fluctuate and change. If it doesn't work, okay, we know that that didn't work, let's try a different, we can go a different direction next time. So, but I want to give it about 6 years. Native grasses take 3 to 5 years to really become established. This is year 3 in this picture. So, my dad, he was a farmer, raised wheat or grew wheat. He thinks it looks horrible. And I think it looks good. So
Just quick question if I could. How long ago was that?
that's this year.
Oh, that's this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just took that picture 2 weeks ago.
I'm just curious, is once the grasses get established, because I've done some planning
Mhm.
on some land. And at first we had the forbs, but once the grasses became dominant, the forbs pretty much died out. Well, got shaded out, and it just became the big four. You know, it became the big four, which is fine, but the forbs really got knocked back.
Yeah, so this is 3 years in. I'll probably give it 2 more years and I'll burn it. And then we'll actually go in there and I'll disc it up in strips. About every 3 years, the whole thing will be disked again. So that's the only way you can do is either knock it back with fire every 3 years, because this is actually Okarche, so just not very far west of Oklahoma City. And so it'll start growing up in trees. And so the only way that we can keep it back is with fire. And I'm not afraid to hit it with a growing season burn. And there's a lot of people that are a little nervous about burning in the summer. But it's amazing when it starts talking about killing brush, what a growing season burn will do. It doesn't look like as green as that is. It's kind of a shoddy burn. It doesn't look real good because it doesn't burn black and all that. But if there is any brush out there, it'll really knock it back, and it really promotes those forbs. Because those here probably, I bet that Mexican sunflower is probably headed out now, flowered. And if you burnt that, then all that seed would immediately drop. So, but it is recent, and that's a common thing. And this has got a lot of your CRP, those big four grasses, and it's going to have to take a lot of disturbance. That's the only way to keep after it, and just to get those grasses knocked back. But yeah, that's a common thing, and that's why CRP isn't real good for quail and all that, is because it gets so thick with no mid-contract management. We do have trouble.
So do you anticipate disking as part of the plan in addition to the fire to keep the forb population optimal?
I don't throw any tools out the box. I want every tool possible. So say I can't get it burned 1 year, I'm not afraid to go out there and disc it. Because after about 5 years and it drops seeds, we dump cattle on there after the growing season's over. We dump cattle on it every year, and they eat whatever is left. And the cows that's where they calve out, is in this 50 acres, and it looks horrible by the time growing season comes the next year, and it comes back and looks like this every year. This is the 3rd year of planting it, and the last year it looked identical to this almost. My dad still does not like this sunflower. I'm just telling you, that sunflower really irritates him. So what's some other things? Riparian habitat. We do a lot of this for the Arkansas river shiner out west, leopard darter. Do a lot of cedar cutting, fence protection or riparian protection with fences. And then since the wild turkey numbers are kind of going down, we're kind of working on cottonwoods. Cottonwoods, you're not seeing your regeneration of cottonwoods as much as you used to. And that's should be a little bit scary for the Department of Wildlife, for turkey roosts. Turkey numbers are kind of going down, and cottonwoods are not necessarily really a long-lived species, softwood. So we're kind of looking at some regeneration and of cottonwoods and trying to do some of that too in these riparian areas. And so that's another thing that some people don't really think about. They see these big cottonwoods out there, but those might last another 20 years, and it might take them, 70 years to grow that big. But so what's going to come back and fill in that void? So that's another one that's probably needs to start being on the radar. And that's a typical riparian area that I work with. It's thick with cedars. And that's what it looked like after. So that's a hot fire. And I'll tell you, that is a hot fire when that fire goes through there. And this actually,
a fire after you.
we actually burnt this after we cut all these cedars. And we pulled them out from all these trees, and we didn't pull them far enough out, because some of those trees actually got killed. But that was a very, very hot fire. We burnt that. That's when they were still green. And the next year they were still browned out, and we burned it. We burned it 1 year after cutting. And that was hot. And the next thing that we do is outdoor classrooms. This is Oklahoma was leading the nation in outdoor classrooms, connecting people to nature, going to schoolyard habitats. And so one of the big things for our jobs is we've got to get that next generation interested. If I'm going to have a job, our next generation has to be interested in wildlife and wildlife conservation. So one of our big initiatives is connecting people with nature. And this is just with dates and the numbers that, people aren't as active out in nature anymore. So here's our schoolyard habitat and outdoor classrooms. Like I said, I got old pictures because that's what I have available. But this is what we generally do is we want a teacher or two involved. We do get phone calls from one teacher in a classroom wanting to, or in a school wanting to do an outdoor classroom. But I require at least 3 because there's management and there's stuff they have to do. It just becomes a lot of work for one person. And so it gets going, and that teacher is really gung-ho. And then after all the work gets involved, it just gets too much. So I like to have at least 3 teachers involved, which is usually fairly easy to do. The science teachers are real easy. And art teachers, you'd be surprised how many art teachers like it. So, so this is what we're there for, the wildlife habitat, but really conservation, education, and then just letting the kids get dirty. I mean, it's okay to get dirty, and I think that's what we're missing. But this is actually an outdoor classroom that was in one of our conservation districts. This is with the county conservation district. We do require the water and we require a shading area. So like this gazebo, we generally require a gazebo. And that is so the teachers can take their students and get them in the shade. Because it's generally hot. It just seems like it's always hot when they're wanting to go out there. And native grasses. This is all that's your Maximian sunflower and Indian grass. And of course, you're going to get your willows and stuff. I can't help that. But does anybody see anything wrong with this picture besides it being old? This one kind of went a different direction for us. This one's actually not there anymore. This one was in Mustang. And there's a school on it now. But lots of invasive plants get planted in them. And that's the one thing that we really have trouble with is they got some arrowhead and stuff like that. And lily pads, but there's a lot of stuff that we get that's invasive. You know, that you get at the pet shop and stuff like that, that's actually kind of invasive. And so that's the one bad thing about our outdoor classrooms. So nesting structures, this one is spare parts, spare structure, and I actually have barn owls using that. And that one's actually had a camera in it and, you know, hit video, and it was all on video and stuff. There's lots of invasives, lots of non-natives. This one is, I think that's Cade County, but this is butterfly gardens, but also we do some butterfly gardens, but we've even done some, you know, neighborhood garden raised beds. We did one in school off of Martin Luther King that the kids plant their gardens. We do gardening in them. And that's something that some of the kids have never really done. So yeah, we are after this wildlife conservation and stuff, but it's still nature and growing and so that's another thing that we have done is some just gardening and giving people an opportunity to garden. Butterfly gardens, we got several of them. That's with the Cherokee Nation, one of the tribes. And a lot of times we capitalize on opportunity. This one might be in Moore or Mustang, but this is another one that's gone. But they were building a school and they had the equipment, so we hurried up and provided them some money to build a little bit of a water structure, and that's what it looked like. They filled it in and put a school on top of it, but that's what it used to look like. And so we always put this picture in presentations, and all these kids are focused. These are the kids that matter. Because those are the ones that haven't really been around it and they're not interested, but these are the ones we need to target, not per se the ones that are. So that's the reason we put it up there, is because that's the kid we're trying to target. So where are we going from here? We're actually putting our strategic plan together for the next 5 years. And this is kind of where we're going. We're going to continue lesser prairie chicken area and the cars, the bat habitat. But we're eliminating this because it was the southeast, because it was so hard to get landowners. And we're going monarch. We're going to really promote the monarch because we can spend our money. The last 2 years, we've spent portions of Texas's money. We've spent more money in Oklahoma in the last 2 years than what they have in 5. We've been getting a lot of extra money, and I was the only one doing it. And they told me I was gonna get burned out, you're gonna get burned out. And so it was really nice to have somebody else on board. So we asked for more money this year, and we ended up getting about $300,000 extra. Our first budget was $400,000. We ended up spending $700,000 this year. So that's what we had to broaden our focus areas, or it just looks like a bunch of postage stamps. And if I pulled up our databases where all our projects are, this swath here, of course, I live in Chandler, so close to home. I can hit that pretty good. So, but that's where we're gonna start targeting, and we like to bring it out to people for our program. It's part of our outreach. Is we have we do these presentations for different people, and so if you have questions, concerns, ideas, we're open. Right now's the time, because we have to have in 2022, by October, we have to have our strategic plan done. So that gives us about a year. So if there's some other areas that you would like to see money targeted, that's what we're out here trying to find out. But just know that we have to tie it to some kind of federal trust species. So, which monarch is easy. And the whole state could be monarch, but they want us to target that down a little bit more than that. So, but with that, I'm actually done, and I ran over quite a bit. So,
Are there any plant species that you can target?
it's hard for us to target a certain plant species because it's got to be at least a species of concern. There's only one plant in Oklahoma that we can really.
Which is one?
It is the rattlesnake. Is it what?
I thought it was a license for one.
No, there's a, you wouldn't ask that probably. But it's really down here. There's some of it on some nature conservancy properties, but it's very, very rare. So it's got to be somewhat protected. Yeah, we don't target a whole lot of plants. It's going to be a fish, a mammal, a bird.
Does the Bering beetle still meet the rules?
Okay, and it does. The Bering beetle is really hard to manage for.
Yeah.
But
There's mostly dead animals around there.
yeah. So the Bering beetle is one. We never have targeted the Bering beetle. And the reason is because their habitat is so wide range. As long as it's, above 8 inches and not, as long as it's got cotton grass, it's just got to have something that's going to die. And so the Bering beetle is pretty hard to manage for. We probably would, but anytime it's something that's put in the native vegetation, it's going to benefit the Bering beetle.
So on those prairie chickens, is that possible to do kind of hatching program, like a home hatching it, and then you can release it to the field, because in Asia, peacocks, they used to be protected and endangered, but after they start raising it at home and then start selling it everywhere, and then so it's no longer endangered. So can we do the same thing for those prairie chickens?
There has been several hatcheries tried. Gallinaceous birds, especially grouse species, are really hard. They don't do well in captive, period, because they just get stressed out. And then when you release them, they don't have that native instinct as much. It's been tried. There's one down in Texas for the Atwater prairie chicken. They've tried to do some with the lesser prairie chicken. The Atwater's prairie chicken is, as far as they know, they don't have any more that have not been turned out from captive breeding. So it's still, they're still trying. There's one up in Bartlesville with Sutton Aviation. They're trying to do it with masked bob whites. And then they were wanting to do graders. They're using greater prairie chickens as the test species to see if they can do lesser prairie chickens. But there's definitely, they're trying, but it's gallinaceous birds and it's hard. It's just a little harder than
Yeah,
what the
I also
code.
want to know the legality of it too, because in most of the Asian countries that whenever, even it's endangered, even it's a protected bird or something like that, and then so if you raise it, and as long as it's the third generations, you're able to sell it. You're able to do
Okay.
whatever you want with it, as long as it's third generation, so not the second, but third. So what they did is, for example, just as an example, Peacocks, and they're able to resell it to restaurants. So that's why, although it sounds horrible, but it did take it out of the endangered list,
Yeah.
you know. So, whatever you're gonna do, so now it's doing really well,